Welcome to the Mystery of Life. I'm Jo.
And I'm Jonny.
And today we're asking, who stole the Antwerp diamonds? Heists were a bit of a funny one, as it turned out, because apparently there actually aren't that many that are completely unsolved. We've gotten very good at solving things.
Yeah, they're not as romantic as Hollywood love you believe.
This is a bit Hollywood.
Most of the time we do catch them, no matter how low. There are very few heists people get away with. Same with bank jobs. I've never heard of someone in my lifetime, I don't think anyone heard of anyone successfully robbing a bank.
There are a couple where we really don't know, but to be honest, we knew so little, it was difficult to make an episode out of it. So I've gone with this one where we have some answers, but there is still a lot of mystery and I think a lot to discuss, and it actually turned into a pretty great one. So let's do it. Also, I have to say that heists are one of those crimes where you feel like no one really got hurt. It just makes them a bit more fun.
Well, it depends how they do it.
No one got physically hurt. That much I can tell you now. Okay, so it was the Antwerp Diamond Heist. The name sort of gives it away. It's actually in the Guinness Book of Records for being the largest ever diamond heist, and it was later upgraded, if upgraded is the best word to use, to one of the largest ever robberies.
Do you reckon they've done that as like a sneaky way to catch them? You just got to come and get your certificate from the Guinness World Records. And
yeah, I don't know that they claimed the Guinness World Record in person. We do mostly know who it was, sort of, which we'll obviously come to. But yeah, I don't think they raised their hand and said, can I have a certificate? I would. If I'd been caught, why not?
Well, yeah, if I was caught, if I wasn't caught.
So we're going back to 2003, and there actually is some controversy over exactly how much was stolen. So let's get into it and we'll run through. Antwerp, Belgium, Diamond District. Now, a lot of places have a Diamond District. We've sort of spoken about diamonds before, but here, this particular Diamond District is where 80% of the world's diamonds are bought or sold and or moved through. 80%.
Yeah.
That's nearly all the diamonds.
It is, but the diamond market is actually very small.
Yeah, we've spoken about that before, haven't we? There is a finite number of diamonds. It won't go on forever.
No. And the conditions to make them don't exist anymore. So whatever the amount of diamonds that a planet has is the amount of diamonds that planet's getting.
Now, in 2003, the Diamond District reported around 3 billion's worth of sales, and that doesn't include all the kind of cash handshake type deals, which apparently are huge in the diamond industry.
I can imagine. I think there's a lot of diamonds you don't want to know the paperwork of.
The district had lots of visitors every day. It was filled with security guards. It had its own police force just for the Diamond District, which was 3 blocks. So it's not very big in terms of square mileage. It had gem dealers, and they would actually have armoured cases, which as they moved their little gems around, they would be handcuffed to their hands.
Yeah.
It's for real. Sounds a bit scary, but this was like everyday life for a gem dealer. So I guess you just it was just part and parcel of it.
And if you go down in London, a lot of them are like Orthodox Jews. So they don't look very flash whatsoever, but they're probably carrying about 2 million worth of diamonds in a little suitcase attached to their wrist.
Well, that actually plays into this because the weekend where this heist took place was a Jewish holiday, and they knew that. So they knew it would be quieter than most, especially quieter as such, because it wasn't very busy at the weekends anyway, but...
Yeah, it's important to note that we're not being racist. It's just largely filled with Jews, the diamond industry.
No, it's a fact. I mean, it's part of this crime.
If you're going to rob a diamond place, do it on a Jewish holiday because most of the employees will be off.
Well, I can't speak for what it's like now or if, how that affects when they're open. But certainly in 2003, it had an impact.
Oh, yeah, it's going to. Especially a lot of them, as I said, are Orthodox, so they follow it.
Now, within the district is the Antwerp Diamond Centre, and this building is sectioned into 3 blocks, A, B and C. And now 2 stories below the B block is its diamond vault. Now, we all know a little bit about vaults, don't we, from Hollywood? And this was, to be honest, quite Hollywood. It was kind of sensational. It was claimed that no one would ever be able to break into it, which I feel is kind of saying to robbers, come on, give us a try.
Yeah, you've got the ones that are like, ooh, I'm not good enough to do that. And you've got the ones that want the challenge and would like to be the guy that did it. And see it. So, you're warding off the petty criminals, but you're really attracting the high end.
Yeah. So to start with, there's armed guards in the building. There's a police force patrolling the area 24 hours a day, and there's surveillance cameras covering almost all of everywhere in the area. Then there's giant metal barricades that are in place on the roads to prevent unauthorised vehicle access. And during the day, to enter legitimately, most buildings submit electronic photos of every person who enters and exits, which are sent to and stored at an off-site security centre. So just before you can get in the building, shit's serious.
Yeah, they take their money very seriously.
The building was then locked with steel roller shutters. So should you make it into the building unannounced and make it down 2 stories to the concrete vault, there's then cameras which detect any motion in the antechamber for the vault. So already I find like this is too much for me. Like I'm not going to be able to do this. I don't know how good I'd be at a heist anyway, to be perfectly frank.
Well, I mean, I would start with the one problem at a time, solve them. So how do you override the cameras? How do you get past this? How do you get past that? And then it becomes a heist.
I could buy getting into the building. That doesn't seem for an experienced like thief. I mean, I definitely couldn't do that.
You could social engineer your way in there.
I can easily believe getting past the cameras and security to get in. But then assuming you get in, you're then met with a combination lock on the door that has more than 100 million combinations.
Yeah, they're not going to crack it. They're going to blow it up.
Well, then you need a physical key which measured a foot long and apparently cannot be replicated. The door was 1 foot thick and weighed 3 tons steel. It could withstand 12 hours of drilling, but it was fitted with seismic sensors which will detect any drilling immediately.
Right, so the offset, my mind is going, well, that's a lot of security.
There's a lot of security, isn't it?
So that's all good as long as it's turned on. So I need to find a way to turn it off.
Well, so far I think that's impressive enough. But if you've gotten to this point, once you've dealt with the combi lock and entered the key, there's then 2 metal plates that have strong magnetic fields. And if you break the magnetic connection, so when the door is open, the magnetic force breaks. If you break that connection, it will then trigger an alarm where you have to enter a security code.
Yeah, you're not getting past this. You need this off.
So let's say you get in the vault, right? You've somehow managed the door and you've gotten in the vault. There's then light and movement sensors. There's infrared sensors. There's a Doppler radar. There's heat sensors, which are so sensitive that it can sense a man's single breath. And then there's 160 safety deposit boxes inside the vault, which all have their own very strong, clever, and unique key lock. So it's like, this is like a lot of work, even for a really good thief. This is very Ocean's 11, though, isn't it?
It is. I think the key is to minimise these difficulties, though. I would literally, I need a computer guy to do this. I need this guy to do this. This wasn't one bloke. No one person has all of these skills necessary to do this job. They needed multiple people with multiple skills right off the gate just to get into the fucking door.
Yeah. I mean, already I just feel like, let's just rob somewhere else. Do you know what I mean? But you've got to know that what you're going in there for must be so valuable that
think about
it's
the
worth
things,
dealing with
think
this.
about what they don't tell you about that's in those vaults.
Yeah.
All the off paper.
Also, I'll tell you how we know a lot of this soon as well. Let's say you've dealt with all of that. Imagine then returning to work. You've left on a Friday night, this super secure vault that no one can break into with all of these alarms. And on a Monday morning, there's just someone standing in your vault, staff, and they're like, oh my God, I don't know what happened. And people are crying, and like staff have stuff saved in these security boxes, and all the alarms were still set. No one knew what happened. Everyone was just like, we don't understand what happened. And it was said to be pandemonium inside.
Well, think about this. I just realised that before any of this, you've got a nice list of security measures. Some fucker's got to find this out.
Yeah. Exactly. This wasn't advertised. We know this because of what happened. This wasn't like...
Well, yeah, because these security measures are ones they no longer use because they did not work.
No.
Someone has circumvented every single security thing that they have.
And the alarm was still set. They didn't trigger.
I mean, that's an
alarm.
inside job. There's no way you can...
But it wasn't. Okay, so for a few days, no one understood it. The police were literally standing around scratching their heads. There is pictures of a policeman scratching his head. Like, they do not know what happened.
And they come from below?
No, there was no drilling involved, can confirm.
Fucking hell.
So this is what I mean. This is Ocean's 11 shit, isn't it? I'd say for a few days, they don't know what to do. And you wouldn't, would you? If you've got no leads, there's no fingerprints, there's nothing. Like, where do you go if you're the police? What do you do here?
I don't know. I think the people in the Diamond District would be pretty annoyed at the person that phoned the police about this.
Well, remember, there is on-site security and the concierge now, but the on-site security is only on one floor because obviously there's all these alarms. They believe that they'll see them. There's cameras that are live, and there's a concierge that lives in the building. He has an apartment in the building. So immediately they start looking at the concierge.
Yeah.
It 100% wasn't him, but they didn't know that at first. You have to, don't you? Because where else do you go with this? Like you said, you have to go inside job because how else can you possibly believe what's happened here? Now, After a few days, police receive a phone call from a farmer who complains about kids leaving trash on his farm. They get quite a lot of calls from him. He's that kind of guy, you know. He's like, can I have a police car come out when there's a bit of rubbish on my land? Look, no one likes littering, but I mean, what do you say to him? You say, look, we'll send over a patrol car, and then sometimes you do if they're not busy. And then a couple of days later, he calls again and he says, I've just found even more rubbish. Please, can you send someone? And they say, look, write us a list. Tell us what you've got and call us back. So he calls them back and he starts listing all this rubbish, sandwiches, bottles of wine. And they're like, okay, it's just kids. And then he says, there's an envelope from the Antwerp Diamond Centre. And then they're like, okay, we're on our way. Yeah. So they obviously take that very seriously, and they've got like multiple people sorting through trash. And it's not long before they've linked the trash to the robbery, and then the person that they believe was at least partially responsible. Rubbish, literally broke this crime. It's amazing.
Yeah. It's the small mistakes. It's the incidental stuff you don't think is going to matter that matters the most.
So now I'm going to tell you about Leonardo Notarbartolo, and I'm going to call him Leonardo because we know how much I struggle to pronounce words. Now, he claims he was born to be a thief. You can read a bit more about his history on the blog, but he was a career criminal. Like, he was very good at what he did. You got to give credit where credit's due. He was a really good thief. He'd reached the point where he didn't do it because he needed the money. He did it because that was what he felt he was meant to do.
Like almost like that gentleman art thief you see in films.
Yeah.
He's just houses full of millions and millions of pounds worth of art, and he's just doing it for the challenge.
Yeah. He later said in interviews that he would study gem dealers in the Antwerp district and follow their routines until he knew them well enough to steal with them. They didn't even realise that they'd been robbed.
Yeah.
He was a smart dude. He married and actually ran a jewellery store in Italy. It was a small family business, and he travelled back and forward to Antwerp twice a month. He would act as a gem dealer. People knew him. They were friends with him. They just thought he was this. He would make little purchases, little genuine trades. So people thought he was this small-time gem dealer, when really, every now and again, he'd follow a gem dealer around and actually rob them blind. And no one was none the wiser. He was legit, essentially, on paper. He was just a normal guy that was as much at risk as anyone else.
He's genius as well because he's in a business where he's earning good money.
Yeah.
So no one's going to... And he can almost, like, if he's got some diamonds to get rid of, he has a jewellery shop that's not going to ask any questions about where these diamonds came from.
No, exactly.
Set them in a ring, send them on their way. No one's, like, until they get looked at. Because I believe diamonds all have serial codes lasered into them. A lot of them, like the legit ones.
I think you can trace them, yeah. And they have like certificates and stuff.
Because for some reason,
some people don't care.
YouTube's decided that, because I once watched, I watch a guy that likes watches.
Right.
That I must be well into my bling. So I get loads of like diamond stuff coming up, and like, we need to go to New York sometime. There's a gold dealer in New York who take gold bars and hides them and says, yours if you find it.
That's really cool. But diamonds are a really interesting thing, like the trade, the expense, like on the whole, they're just genuinely very... We did that episode about the Hope Diamond, and that was really interesting as well. Completely different, but interesting. Now, at this point is where the controversy comes in, because it depends whose version of events you choose to believe. Ultimately, the police don't really know what happened, other than what they can confirm went missing. And what I've told you so far. So I'm going to tell you what Leonardo eventually disclosed in a very rare but detailed interview. Okay,
was it close to when he was going to die?
No, I think he's still alive.
I always enjoy when a thief kind of just like at the end, because like I've said to you before that Ronnie Biggs is my ultimate hero when it comes to criminals. I love that he got away with it, lived an entire life, got cancer, and went, well, that's expensive. I'll go get the British government to give me free free cancer treatment. And I love Brazil for repeatedly refusing to extradite him. Brazil used him as a tourist. Like, no, you could go and see Ronnie Biggs as a tourist thing. Like, you could, he wasn't hiding in Brazil. He was just in Brazil being Ronnie Biggs, and Brazil were like, we're not giving him this up, this cash cow. Hell no.
No, that's kind of great. So what I'm going to tell you is, as I say, it's Leonardo's version of events, because honestly, that's all we have. Okay,
having known some criminals in my time as well, I can tell you that his series of events are edited.
They probably are, and at the end you might see why, but there is some facts that the police
Oh no, there will be fact in there, but there is parts he's leaving out for his own benefit, and because there's stuff in there, like he won't be telling you everything he got. He won't be telling you everything he did, because
no. And that's
you've
it.
got to take on word. This is why. Like, oh yeah, I only got this many diamonds.
This is what I'm saying. This is his version of events. The reason we know how they got in is because that's what he's telling us. Because the police, they still don't know. So let's just be clear about that. But we've got ultimately he did get in. So
my mind is leaning towards he didn't leave. Like he was there. Like, do you know what I mean? Like he hid somewhere.
So he says he was recruited by another gem dealer who knew of his criminal links. So within the Diamond District, there was a few people that you could trade with illegally. You know, you all know each other, don't you? And they were doing the same sort of thing as what Leonardo was doing, and they'd move stolen goods. So, and one of these dealers...
probably like blood diamonds, like any form of illegal stuff.
I don't know what other crimes he was doing, but yeah, he had, you know, some contacts, and this particular gem dealer approached him, and he was kind of trusted in the area. He also had his own, Leonardo had his own small office space within the Diamond Centre that he rented for a few hundred a month. So again, it just strengthens his...
Hold on, you can rent an office space in the Diamond Centre?
Yeah, well, I don't know if you still can.
For a few hundred a month?
It was €700. Yeah. It was like a small room, but
that's
yes.
Just begging, though. That's like...
Well, they thought he was a gem dealer. You know, it made sense because and then he had an apartment in Antwerp as well because, again, he's making the journey from Italy.
If he's a gem dealer, he can afford a better hotel.
So, but this other gem dealer, whose name he didn't confirm, this other guy approached Leonardo one day and offered to pay him €100,000 to answer a question. And he wanted to know, can the vault at the Diamond Centre be robbed? And Leonardo said no. Like, Leonardo kept his own stuff in that vault. He was satisfied that was a safe, and impenetrable vault.
Yeah,
but
one thing you learn a lot when you're studying computer science and security, and it counts for all security, is there ain't nothing that can't be broken.
Well, clearly,
like there is nothing that doesn't have a weakness. You just got to minimize those weaknesses. So it's foolhardy for them to think that it can't be robbed. That's where they go wrong at this. They're what's the word? Arrogance is part of the problem. They think that this cannot be got into. So there's mistakes will happen.
Yeah.
You just got to wait.
But they think it couldn't be gotten into because of all the measures they've got in place. So that still relied on someone.
All those measures require humans.
Yeah.
Humans make mistakes. Humans can be bought. Humans can be tricked.
Okay. So Leonardo thought, well, look, he said to this guy, I think it can't be broken into, but I want 100K. So he agreed to take a pen camera in his top pocket because you were not allowed to take photos in the Diamond District. You absolutely, if you were seen with a camera, you were gone and you were never allowed back. But he had
many reasons.
He had this tiny little pen camera in the top of his shirt pocket. No one questioned it, especially in 2003 when obviously technology clearly existed, but I don't know if you're as suspicious of pen cameras as you are maybe in 2023.
I just don't think in your day to day you're looking for spy shit.
And remember, this guy was trusted. So again, you weren't expecting him to have a camera with him. So he was like, okay, I'll go and take some photos. So off he went and he got into the vault and he managed to take loads of photos. And he handed the photos over, got paid and said, look, I still think, even with all these photos, that this cannot be done. We can't break into it. Let's call it a day. And that was that. And then 5 months later, he got a phone call and the dealer said, right, come and meet me in this warehouse type building, and it was out in the middle of nowhere in Antwerp in Belgium. Off he went, he got there, and inside there was an exact replica of the antechamber and the vault that they had put together based on the photos that had been taken. And according to Leonardo, at this point was when he was introduced to 3 other people: the genius, who was an expert in alarm systems, the monster, who was a strong big man, an electrician, lockpicker, and a mechanic. And apparently he was called the monster because he was big and also he was just monstrously good at things. It's kind of cool. And the king of keys, which was like a cute little old man and was an expert key replicator and lockpicker.
Part of me wants to see a 1 foot long key.
I know, right?
Imagine the key ring.
I think we have a photo. If I find it, I'll put it on the blog.
I would have thought that a bigger key was easier to fake as well.
Yeah, I thought that, but I guess maybe there's more, because on a normal key, obviously the bit that's unique is the amount of ups and downs, the amount of pointy bits and stuff. I guess if you've got multiple layers of that. So they were going to practice on this replica vault and they were going to rob the place. And they practiced and planned for 18 months. And Leonardo even managed to get back into the genuine vault when he was accessing his box and had a little camera in his shoulder bag. So he managed to get videos of everything as well. I mean, yeah, 18 months, I guess it has to be several millions, doesn't it, to be able to have the payoff for that kind of planning?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you think about the scale of this robbery, do you remember the Millennium Dome heist?
No.
Yeah, there was a diamond visit, when the Millennium Dome was first done, there was this diamond on tour and some fuckers tried to steal it.
Yeah.
They went to these efforts. And their plan was basically put bulldozers through the front door. And they're still going through these for months and months and months on end, practicing. And it was nowhere near, it was complex, but basically They A-teamed a bulldozer and drove it into the place.
So they scheduled it for the 15th and 16th of February, which, as I say, was a weekend. It was a religious holiday for the Jewish community, which meant that it was very, very quiet in the Diamond District, like quieter than normal because it was never really busy over the weekend, but it was particularly quiet. And also the monthly shipment for De Beers would just have arrived. De Beers are the world's largest diamond mining company. I don't know if that's still true. I expect it is.
That stuff like that is probably common knowledge as well.
Yeah.
Which, again, is counterintuitive to your security concerns.
They were also joined by Speedy, who was a friend of Leonardo's. They had grew up together and they worked together for more than 30 years. The rest of the crew apparently were not overly happy with Speedy because apparently he was known to be quite panicky on a job, which is, not what you want on a job like this. But Leonardo was like, no, he's in. He's coming in.
I'm guessing getaway driver.
Well, I thought that, but no. I don't know what his job was. He was just there. He was just a part of it. He was involved, but I don't think he had his own
Maybe Leonardo
skill.
just wanted someone on his side in the group.
Yeah, I think so. And then they got on with it. So it's the middle of the night. They parked on the outskirts of the district in a rented Peugeot 307 and they got out with multiple duffel bags.
It's important to note, like, I know it's funny that it was a Peugeot 307,
Yeah.
but any crime in Europe is going to have that funny detail because they're just our cars.
Yeah.
No one's going to turn up to a heist in a Lambo.
Also, it was just like your everyday car and he'd rented it. So it does make sense that...
You want to be as...
Yeah. And also, I think that having a car rather than a van is a lot less conspicuous. So after they're obviously studying for 18 months, they did manage to find a route around the back of the district and make it into an office building on the other side of the B block, as it were, so like the block they needed to get into, that wasn't covered by CCTV. It was very specific. They had to be very careful, but they found it and they got to the building. So already... you've got past two of the big features that they say are a thing. Then you've got to get into the building. So it was on the second floor where they had to enter. There was like a terraced area and they'd previously managed to stash a ladder there so that they could climb up and get in. So, yeah, a lot of pre-planning needed.
There's a lot of pre-planning, but also think how basic this is still.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Already you're getting past some of this stuff that they're like the Diamond District's like, come to our district, we've got all this security.
Those security measures you can't break, you circumvent.
There was a heat sensing camera on the terrace, but the genius managed to sort of approach it from behind and used literally a polyester shield that stopped it from picking any heat up, which of course they've practiced on all of this stuff. They've got videos of it. They knew what they were dealing with. They were able to practice it. This then meant that then they were literally able to open the window and climb into the building. And this meant that they had now made it into the building without being detected. And security are on the floor above them. So they had to be very quiet, but there was security on the floor above. Then, to avoid CCTV, they had to go down the basically like a abandoned stair shaft, but it was like very easy to do. They were able to essentially walk down there. It wasn't particularly difficult. Now, I'm not really sure you're surprised at this point that they've made it this far, because I think we can all agree that human beings and CCTV cameras, even today, you can pretty easily get past. With skills, obviously, not me. And in good planning, the day before, so Friday, Leonardo had accessed his box. And when he was in there, because remember, although people are watching him, no one's really watching him because they know him. So they've let him in. They know he's in there, but they're just eating their lunch and doing their stuff. And while he's in there, he sprays the heat and movement sensor with hairspray. That simple. And that created an oily film which would prevent it from going off. For at least a time. They weren't convinced how long it would actually last. So they suspected it was about 5 minutes. And that's 5 minutes once it was set off. So obviously, like in this instance, he's standing in there with it, but he's, the alarm codes have been put in. He's supposed to be in the room. But if you'd broken in, it would take about 5 minutes to get past before the temperature rose enough for it to realise that there was someone in there. Smart. But again,
they made a specific tool to open the boxes as well, didn't they? Like it was something that bespoke that they could use to just wrench them.
I don't know that it was completely bespoke. It's not now. It's like a known thing. But yes, yeah, the King of Keys handled that one. They then used black plastic bags to cover security cameras in the antechamber, and police were never able to determine any of this up to this point still. So even now, they don't know how this is, again, all Leonardo's word for it. So great. Okay, they're in the antechamber, but now what? Now they've got this massive door in front of them, right? There's multiple things they've got to deal with. So the King of Keys has made a replica key.
Yeah, I was thinking every key can be copied. Otherwise, what happens if you lose it?
Well, they videoed the security guards using the key because obviously they wanted to see a number of things, which also leads me to my next point. They also wanted to see if they could try and figure out at least some of the numbers on the combination lock. So there was a lot of videos going on every time he accessed his vault, and he had to be careful not to do it too much. But of course, he did go there a couple of times a month anyway. They videoed it, and they realised that the security guards always went to a utility closet before they opened the vault. So they thought, I wonder if the key is in the utility closet, because even though they had a replica, they were like, well, if we can use the right one, we will. So that was just literally locked with a padlock. So they were easily able to get that open and get in the utility closet, and there it was, hanging on the wall. So your mega key is in a security closet, which this must be true because surely someone at the Diamond Centre would have gone like, no, that's not true. It was locked in this box. So I guess at least that part of this story must be genuine. So now they've got a key. Now, police don't ever actually know if the other key was replicated like they said. So they might have made that up. They claim they had a replica with them just in case, but they used the original. They were able to learn the encode entirely by watching the videos that they had taken. So that meant they've now dealt with the lock and the combi lock.
Mm-hmm.
Then they've got the magnetic plates to deal with. If these were broken, you have to enter that security code. And they didn't know that code. They hadn't been able to figure out that code. So the genius made an aluminium plate where he was able to unscrew both magnets and reposition them, pivot them slowly onto the plate, and the magnetic field was never broken. But he was able to literally lift them off the vault and just put them down.
Yeah.
So these things that sounded incredible, they're, like you say, it's all very basic, really, isn't it? I mean, I couldn't do it, but...
Yeah, you just got to take each problem, solve it. That's it.
Then they just opened the door.
Yeah, they're to the system, they're in legitimately.
Now, at this point, they did have to turn off the lights because there's a light sensor inside the vault. So they're now in complete darkness. And Leonardo, at this point, is now waiting in the car with his police scanner. So he didn't really have much to do with it, if you take his word for it. He's just in the car, he's just... Speedy has scampered back up the stairwell to say we're in because there's no phone signal down two floors in the vault. So Speedy's run back up and said we're in, and Leonardo just waits in the car. Then there's a metal grate. That's quite easy to deal with. There's just a lock that's easily picked by either the monster or the King of Keys. Then the monster goes in, and he has to do this in complete darkness because he has to reach a panel in the ceiling to be able to mess with the electrics. In short, he manages to bypass the security system without it going off. This involved cutting the jacket, if that's the term, the outer sort of jacket of the wires, but not cut the wires themselves or the alarms would go off. And he had to then rewire them together in the air. So he had his arms up in the air, in the dark. He has to do all of this from memory on the practice things that they had, and obviously taking into account they've never actually seen their wires, so they might be slightly different from what he was expecting. And he only had no more than 5 minutes because otherwise he'd set off the heat sensor. So he had to be very careful not to get overly hot. So he had to kind of manage his breathing and try and stay as cool and calm as possible to give him as long as possible before triggering that alarm. But he did it. With his hands above his head in the dark, he managed to rewire it so it essentially went round on a loop and the security system didn't know that anything had happened. Sounds easy.
It doesn't sound easy, it sounds basic. And that's what these flaws come down to in any security setting. It's the tiniest of things.
Then, like you said, the next thing they had to deal with is the individual security boxes. And they did build this tool that basically was like tension. So they sort of put it in place over the top of the particular vault that they wanted to open, particular box. And then they'd sort of screw it around. It took about 3 minutes to open one. And then it literally just sort of forced it out. So you weren't even picking keys. You were literally just forcing these things out. And that did make quite a lot of noise, but they still had to do it all in darkness. They would use the flashlight for a second if they needed to reposition something because they didn't want to trigger the light sensor, which was the only thing they hadn't really dealt with. And then for the next 5 hours, they just stood in the vault and filled up their bags.
Yep.
Simple as that.
Ain't no one coming.
They left loads behind.
Of course they did.
There was 180 boxes and they opened more than 100. But they think that the stuff they left behind was simply time because they couldn't really see what they were taking. And when you look at the pictures, which I will put on the blog this week, it's just boxes on the floor. There's the police said they walked in and found a 35,000 euro diamond chain on the floor straight away, like first thing. And they were like, oh, they must have left this because they knew what they were taking. But Leonardo says no, they just had to take like what they could because they couldn't see. And what they did know to take was little satchels used by gem dealers, and you could fill them because they were these little black like box type things, and they expected they would be filled with diamonds because they knew the dealers. So when they felt them, they just slung the box in, didn't even open the box, they just took the boxes and then just filled up with everything else. They had currency in various different currencies, loads of money. They just took whatever they could. They worked in silence and in darkness. And then when it got to about 5:30 in the morning, they had to stop because they were running out of time. They'd been in there for hours. It took them about an hour to lug all of these heavy bags back to the car without being detected. They literally went out the same way they came in, so up the stairwell, avoided the security cameras, made it this specific route back round and loaded it all into Leonardo's car. That's it, done. They drove back to Leonardo's Antwerp apartment. No one knew until Monday morning. I just feel like it is just a cool heist. Like, I know some people got their stuff stolen, but like...
You've got to feel like you're the bollocks having pulled that off.
I know, it wasn't even like they were running away from an alarm at the end or anything.
Like, just go that perfectly.
Yeah.
But I assume they got caught because you're telling this story.
Yes, he didn't volunteer this information out of the kindness of his heart. Well, I guess he sort of did eventually, but... Also, as a final measure, they took the tapes from the cameras. That is one thing that the age of this crime has changed, because they took the videotapes and that was it. There was no security footage. So even if they had have been picked up, obviously in theory, if they'd been picked up at the time, someone would have seen them watching it live, but it didn't matter. They just took the ones that they could and they left. So you don't get that anymore. Now it's all, you'd have to find a way to disconnect them, wouldn't you, to stop it from... So about half hour later, they're in... Leonardo's Antwerp apartment, and they started inspecting their stash. They got a lot of stuff. But then they started opening the satchels that belonged to the gem dealers. And Leonardo said at this point they knew they had been set up. And this is where it gets sketchy, because a lot of people and a lot of law enforcement believe that there was no gem dealer. They believe that Leonardo masterminded the whole thing. But Leonardo said, that the gem dealers' satchels were empty, and he claimed that they only stole around 20 million euros worth of stuff. But actually, it was reported as totaling around 100 million that went missing. But he says, no, that's how much we expected, but we only got 20 million. The gem dealer never introduced him to these people. He already knew them. That's what the police think. What do you think so far? Leonardo is saying he's scammed. He's saying the gem dealer had told all the other dealers to empty their satchels, leave them in the vault, and then claim insurance money after the robbery.
It's possible, but no, I think Leonardo is, and that man one and the same.
Well, the next day they all had to go back to Italy. That was always the plan, because at the time, and I don't know if this is still true, but there was no extradition to Belgium. So if they had have been caught and they were in Italy, like, they wouldn't play ball, they thought. They did have some trash to get rid of, though, as we know. And this included food and packets, like things that from their time at the apartment, so things from the planning stages. It also included the gloves that they used to not be detected. They were obviously wearing gloves to avoid any fingerprinting, and just general other bits and pieces. Nothing of real interest, but they knew it had evidence. They knew they had to be very careful and get rid of this last thing. So it's Sunday night, and Speedy and Leonardo, being that they're friends, are making the 10-hour drive home. But now Speedy is getting panicked. Now, we heard about this. We heard Speedy might get panicked. He says he can't bear the trash in the back. He says it's incriminating. He's worried they're going to get pulled over and caught. And Leonardo's like, no, like, don't worry about it. It's just a couple of bags of rubbish. We'll sort it out. In the end, they pull over into this wooded area. Leonardo tells Speedy to wait in the car whilst he checks it out. He's going to find somewhere to burn all this trash. He needs to make sure there's no one around and that they're safe. So he gets out. He walks around for about 10 minutes. He finds a place. When he walks back to the car, he says that Speedy is like having a full-on breakdown. He's unraveling the videotapes. He's like throwing the rubbish out of the car. There's like money flying around and like tiny gems that they just didn't care about and ended up in the trash. There's like the envelopes, of course, that they then tied them to this. And he's in a full-blown panic. Now, at this point, Leonardo knows he can't recover this. There's no way to get all of this rubbish back in its bag and get it burnt. But he thinks, right, let me stop Speedy. Let me get Speedy in the car. Let's get him home. I'll come back and check on this and we'll burn it all. But of course, we know that didn't happen. And in the end, Leonardo's like, well, no one's going to find it. It was in the middle of nowhere. Let's just leave it. But they didn't count on this cute little old man who cared enough to keep ringing the police because people kept littering. Good old Mr. Van Camp. And that brings us full circle. I mean, it wasn't even really the envelopes that did it. That might have gotten the police to attend, but what tied Leonardo to the crime was receipts for food, wine and salami that they had eaten, which then led to video footage of these people. So people they now believe to be the monster, the genius, etc., who were in the area from that time. Because although they got rid of footage from the Diamond Centre, they didn't obviously get rid of footage from the salami shop.
No, yeah.
Leonardo never identified his accomplices other than calling them the genius, the monster, the king of keys. But they were caught, or at least two of them were. And generally people make the connections. There are photos and more information on all of them on this week's blog because it's not like hugely important to this story. But Leonardo had to drive back to the Diamond District. He needed to return the rental car and the plan was for him to show up, do some deals so no one suspected him. And his wife went with him, so it was all like a nice, cute, genuine trip. Whilst he was gone though, he was bombing it back to Antwerp. Belgian police had figured out it was him that they wanted to speak to, and they asked the Italian police to just pop over and search the house for him, see if they can tie this to him, and they agreed. So even though they might not have extradition, doesn't mean Italians can't go, oh, well, we can search the house for you. We can, convict him of something or look into it. Based on the receipts and evidence they had, the Italian police went ahead and knocked on his door, and his son, Marco, who was 24, so a grown-up, refused to let him in. He said, no, you're not coming in. He rings his dad and his mum, and he's desperately trying to get hold of him because he knows now if he goes back to Antwerp, they know who he is. But he can't reach him. They don't answer the phone. Police know by now that everyone involved could well be halfway across the globe. They think we're probably not going to get him. Like, if he's not home and we don't know who the others are yet, we're done. But Leonardo just walked back into the Diamond Centre and said hello, and one of the security guards recognised him and called the police, and he was arrested. It was as simple as that in the end.
Good old Speedy.
Well, this is if you believe Leonardo's story, remember. This all comes down to what he said. So next they got the monster. They identified him he bought the salami, and then they got cell phone records, and then they got permission to search his girlfriend's house where they found 5 marked bills traced back to the vault. He got 5 years in prison. Then they got the genius. They tied him to Leonardo because they found his business card with the trash. And the genius then said, oh, well, I installed some security equipment in his office, but he knew nothing about the crime. But then they managed to get some DNA off a bit of tape in the rubbish, and they'd already tied him to the crime. He got 5 years, although not until 2007 when he was finally extradited to Belgium. So I guess that changed at some stage. Speedy was also found. He'd been obviously a lifelong friend of Leonardo. It wasn't that hard to tie him to him, and he got 5 years. But they never identified the King of Keys. They do know there was a 5th thief because of DNA and cell phone evidence, but they still don't know who he is.
Oh, it's some
and they never found him.
Leave him be.
I kind of think that's cool. Like, you've got one that got away. We don't know who he is. He's just the King of Keys out there. Like, he could have it all. He could have the rest of the 80 million. Leonardo got 10 years because they could prove that he was the mastermind, and they tried to tie it to organised crime. They actually went back and watched security footage over the last 18 months. They noticed his pen camera, his video camera. Once you're looking for it, it was really easy to see. They actually found some diamonds in his home, polished and unpolished, with certificates linking back to the vault. And they found some small diamonds in the carpet from his Antwerp apartment. So I guess that if you think you've gotten away with it, which they almost fucking did, let's be fair. Now, at the time, I'm not sure if this is still true. I think it is from a quick Google. You could only get a maximum of 5 years in prison. So it didn't matter if you stole $100 million worth of diamonds or a teddy bear.
Yeah.
Or some gummy bears or a book. Didn't matter. You got 5 years.
Yeah.
So you might as well go for it, hadn't you?
Well, that presumes you don't hurt anyone in the process and things like that.
Yeah, he didn't hurt anyone. Leonardo's cousin, though, was also a mafia don. He was tipped to be the head of the entire Sicilian mafia. So Leonardo refused to discuss this. He would never say a word on the whole thing, but they managed to tie the two together, and so he got 10 years. But it's not really a very long time, is it? If you've got like 80 million waiting. Leonardo actually served 4 years, violated parole, and then served another 2 more years, but 6 years. No one served their full term. No one received the majority of the diamonds. Well, I say that, but we don't know where 80 million euros worth of diamonds are. So the ones they recovered was only part of the 20 million that Leonardo claims to have stolen. He was only caught because of the trash, and most of that was what we know from Leonardo. So what do you think really happened? Did this gem dealer exist? Was there really only 20 million?
I'm back and forth about the actual amount. That could be anything, but I don't think there was a third person. I think Leonardo just didn't want to be the brains behind it all. Was hoping for the 5-year sentence, not the 10-year sentence.
Leonardo's been compared to Danny Ocean, which is not really a surprise. This is very Ocean's 11, but by that they mean he was the charming one. So he was the one that did the talking and kept it all together. I mean, clearly evidence shows that he was involved, but I don't know, was he really just waiting in the car?
He's not going to say anything that incriminates him more than he is, and he's not going to give away any of his skills. And if I was a robber, I'd want them to think that it was as easy as fuck, because I'd want them to be embarrassed. Be like, no, it was easy. I just did this, and this.
Well, because they don't know.
No,
this is what we, as I said, when I told you, this is now what we're taking his word for. That's true.
Like, it could have been way more complicated and difficult.
After 6 years in prison, he gave an interview over 12 weeks to Wired magazine. It was very well written. I'll link to it on the blog this week. And that was where this information comes from. He doesn't really speak to anybody else. Like, he wasn't like he did a press tour afterwards and wrote a book. Like, he did that. He granted that one interview, and he said at the beginning that he's a liar and a thief, but what he's about to say is all true. Mm. Well, I mean, I gotta be honest, I kind of like him. Is that bad?
Yeah, everyone loves a lovable rogue.
So yeah, that's it. And you've got a lot of mystery there because we don't know who the King of Keys is. We were able to identify the genius and the monster and Speedy because they've all served time. But like, I mean, whether they knew him first,
none of them are going to say. They're all onto a good thing if they keep their mouth shut. Because
they do know that $100 million worth of diamonds is said to have gone missing. Like, that's what police believe that because and that's what it's listed at. That's why it gets its Guinness World Record. But the question is, was it part of an elaborate insurance scam by this other gem dealer, or is there 80 million euros worth of diamonds hidden in the Italian Alps?
You'll never know. The only thing is I don't think he had time to hide them.
Well, he had a couple of days. He was at home for a few days. So before they drove back to the Diamond District.
I suppose.
And he could have hidden them somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
Especially once Speedy did his thing. You might have thought, shit, we need to be prepared now.
I'm sure that the details are a little bit different to what he says, but I think he's giving you the roundabout truth. He's just not giving you the whole truth. I think there's some more money out there. Maybe not 100 million.
Well, they're all out now. So I also wonder, do we really think he's sitting at home quietly? I mean, he might be now because he's obviously quite old. But like these people, he got out and then broke parole. So I can only assume he was doing something illegal. I couldn't find exactly what he did, other than just
makes me like him a little bit parole. More. He was like, fuck my parole.
Yeah. So did you just start robbing again? I mean, they probably would have taken quite a lot of stuff. They don't really let you keep your ill-gotten gains, do they?
Not the stuff they know about, but that's why you hide it.
Oh, that's it. I think that's kind of great. I enjoyed that.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of fun. Ultimately, it was rich people that got their stuff stolen, so I don't really care.
I'm sure there was some sentimental stuff in there. I'm sure some of it was quite sad, but it was all insured. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was like...
I don't care. They're keeping stuff in a diamond vault in Antwerp. They were rich.
I don't have a vault.
No, exactly. Fuck them.
I guess I just love the whole like Ocean's 11 thing about it. It's just, I feel like that's what this film was based on. No evidence of that, by the way.
You can appreciate good crime done well.
Yeah. Except it wasn't really. They got caught, didn't they? That silly little error, though. Can you imagine, like, if Speedy didn't freak out, or were they just stupid and he didn't want to admit it, so he blamed it all on Speedy, but really they were both just chucking it out the window, thought no one would ever catch him.
Or, like, a lot of the time, you'll find that criminals count on being arrested.
Why?
Because it's like an occupational hazard for them.
Uh-huh.
So, like, a drug dealer, he pretty much accepts that at some point he is going to spend some time in a correctional facility.
Do you think, though?
So they make their money, they hide their money, they serve their time, and they come out clean and go and get their money.
Do you think surely someone's still keeping an eye on him, right?
Not allowed to.
At least I bet they were for his like parole.
For a little while, but like you haven't got the time, resources, and effort.
Yeah.
And it's against his human rights.
I reckon he definitely had more stashed away, 100%.
I mean, his cousin is a mafia don. Like, I
doubt he still is. But
I doubt they're going like they're worried for money in that family.
Yeah. Well, I loved that.
I enjoyed it too.
You can read more about this and you can see some photos on our blog at mysteryoflifepodcast.co.uk. Also, I just want to say thank you. I have noticed that quite a few of you have been leaving reviews and ratings on Spotify, so thank you for that. I don't ask often enough, but I guess sometimes you just come to those episodes where I've asked. So if you are listening on any platform where you can do that, please do give us a 5-star review. Very grateful. And we'll be back next week.
Goodbye.
Bye.